Something which I think, at very least, everyone is much more happy about and content about is how great the freaking new guns this season are.
The loot, yeah.
The loot has been fucking fantastic this season. Like, oh my goodness.
It's getting better. Like, Chosen was very good, and this one seems like, it seems like they're raising the bar on the loot. And again, it means so much more now that sunsetting is gone, as amazing as that is, because it just like now when I play the game, I feel like it's, I feel like my loot isn't going to be disappearing. Like every season when you log on, it'll be like, hey, what's gone now? What's got the white stamp of death? What's now useless?
What do I have to delete?
But now it's like, okay, cool. I can just chill. I can grind for loot, and it's meaningful, and it's going to be here forever. The little infinite symbol is just so satisfying to see, because it's like, I can grind loot, and it's not just going to disappear, because it was just very, very, very annoying. Every season it's like, what's going to disappear next season? But the loot feels so much more meaningful, and there's a lot more incentive to grind, which is can't sing enough praises. I mean, obviously, probably shouldn't have been in there in the first place, but it is amazing that the loot system seems a lot more just meaningful now that you can keep stuff forever.
And the nice thing is that there's it's got so many different tiers to it, right? So like at current, I'm chasing a grenade launcher called Empty Vessel from Strikes. And I know that like that's a long-term chase. There's not always a huge chance that it drops every single strike, and it could drop alongside all the other strike-specific weapons. So if I'm doing a Nightfall as like the 3-player, not Adept, but I think it's a hero version of it, I could also get, say, whatever the weekly Nightfall weapon is. This week it was Plug 1, next week it could be Hung Jury, but I could also get it alongside all these other weapons like Royal Entry, which if I get a roll of that, that's great. But the cool thing is, while I'm doing that, I'm also earning ether, and when my Splicer Gauntlet is full of ether, I can turn that into keys. I can fill it with ether one more time, and then I can go ahead and do a targeted farm in all the stuff that's going on with Override, and I can go ahead and grab a whole bunch of different stuff from there, which is from the new seasonal loot pool, and that stuff is a lot more easy to farm, not just because you're guaranteed to get one from every chest pull, but also because of the fact that the perk pools in those are much more narrow, they're much more selective, instead of Empty Vessel or Royal Entry, which have something like 12 perks in columns 3 and 4. And so, you're much more likely to get a good weapon from all of that. And baked under all of that are the weapons that have been added into the loot pool this season, in the world pool. So, I mean, whether it's stuff that was added in from last season thanks to Season of the Chosen, or whether it's things that have been around for quite some time, such as the Seraph weapons from Warmind, or whether it's the God Roll Truth Teller that I finally got to drop for me that I'd been hunting for ages, that's all there. And then you also have to consider exotics, primes, and umbral engrams, all three of which are a different reward system that flows through any part of the game that you play. So in the case of like farming for one weapon, if you're really going full in, you can also accumulate a ton of other great loot, and do so for the most part by doing what activities you want, with the exception of those specific playlist weapons, which in themselves, they can be farmed alongside a lot of other stuff. And it makes a lot of these play sessions feel very rewarding, I've seen so many people come out of, say, a great session where they've done a bunch of keys in Override, and they may not have the perfect Chroma Rush yet, but they've got a damn near good one, It may not have both Heating Up and Rampage, but it has Rampage and, say, Tunnel Vision, and they're experimenting with new perks that feel really good, and they've got this ability to suddenly experiment with new weapons like that. And that's another thing. New perks. Like, they have great new perks this season. Like, it's not exactly something that I think everybody was immediately tuned in with, but I think one of the longest arguments that have existed about Bungie and game design, and one of the biggest lacks of faith, especially at the beginning of Destiny 2, was I don't trust Bungie to come up with inventive perks anymore. And then slowly we started, seeing stuff get added into the sandbox. And by this point in time, you've got things like Frenzy, which was added last season, which is completely ridiculous. They added back things like Reservoir Burst. They have Heating Up and Tunnel Vision and Adrenaline Junkie this season, and a whole load of other perks, which I'm not going to mention just yet because they appear on raid weapons in Vault of Glass that I happen to have seen because, some spoilers are out there on the internet. But, there are great combinations of things that you can do with all these new weapons. It's really exciting to see them come back.
Yeah, I think that can't be understated as well. Like, the seasons do a good job of just peppering in slight bits of new content among everything. Like, you've got the aspects, you've got a couple of new exotics, you've got new perks, which is very important because again, like back in our day, you didn't get new perks very often, and they weren't very good. But now we're getting almost more perks than I can keep track of, and they're very often, and they do a lot of new things. And as you said, like they're because the game had so many perks, it was kind of difficult to them to come up with ones that were unique and almost worthwhile. But they're doing a pretty good job of coming up with just unique and interesting ones that aren't just so cookie cutter and aren't just increased reload speed, increased damage. They're actually coming up with perks that are more interesting, and that does a lot to just make the new loot more valuable, because that's always been a problem as well. They add just new guns. It's like, okay, cool, this is an auto rifle, but what does it do that my other 27 auto rifles don't do? But it's like, oh, this one's new, it can roll with this perk. So it just gives you more incentive to actually grind it. But the loot system in general in this, the loot loop in this season is I like it a lot. It seems just a good bit better than last season, especially like the gauntlet,
the convoluted hammer charges system.
Yeah,
which
I
was
didn't like that at all.
Do a thing to get a thing to charge a thing to charge an umbral.
An umbral seemed very pointless last season. They seemed very just like, I don't know, just seemed a bit kind of, they're there, and especially focusing them. That never really, like, it seems just the whole thing of like Cabal Gold and then doing the battlegrounds and then getting charges and then umbrals and then using the charges. It's just so confusing to wrap your head around. Again, I have no idea how new players would understand that kind of stuff. But the Splicer Gauntlet, the perks on it are so much better than the hammer last time. Like, I feel like the perks on the hammer last time just seemed so just kind of random and a bit kind of, they don't really affect gameplay much. They were just kind of like, increase your Cabal Gold, increase your charges, and like a chance of piecing up a piece of armor when you break. They don't really seem that like noticeable. Whereas this time it seems kind of like kind of reminds me of Season of Arrivals and what was the Season of the Worthy, where the perks actually they affect the seasonal activity being override, and like the walls do less damage, you get extra loot. Like it just seems like the perks are more noticeable and they do more things. They kind of make life a bit easier, which I like to see. So the perks are a lot more meaningful this time around, which I like. And I like Override a lot. And just the gameplay loop seems a lot more interesting. And again, with the new perks and the lack of sunsetting, it seems a lot more meaningful. So the loot gets a thumbs up from me.
Absolutely. And I think as well, there's another thing to the focusing side of everything, which I think is greatly improved, which is that there's a system here which works for players universally. If you're a player that does not have a lot of time to play, you're going to be using your decrypted data predominantly on focusing umbral engrams. And that's fine. You don't really need to worry about upgrading your Splicer Gauntlet because you're not playing so much that you would actually get the benefits of anything. You're not getting to that point where you're doing tons and tons and tons of completions every single time. So you don't need to worry about things like Code Strider. You don't need to worry about all the damage debuffs. Like, you're not playing enough for that to truly affect you. You're not even playing enough to get enough ether to expand all your slots, because you're not doing Nightfalls back to back and getting all this ether from all the kills and the completions. Instead, you can go ahead and focus on using those resources to something that is immediately going to be useful to you. But if you are a hardcore player, and if you have got all the Gauntlet upgrades, you will then have the expanded pool of resources that allows you to then go ahead and then focus and target farm things more effectively. And what's even cooler about the system is that if you're sitting there and you're looking at how you earn your decrypted data, you earn it by going through and doing the same activity that has a chance to drop those weapons. So your time is not being wasted on an activity that is not going to help you advance towards those things. If you're looking for your perfect Sojourner's Tale, that new shotgun that's come along, you might get it just dropping from the chest at the end. And then that's been really worth your time, because then you can think about what you want to earn next with your decrypted data, which you could then focus, which you'll also get from that same chest. It's one of these systems where it seems as though it's a bit odd at first, but actually I think that there is a lot of strength to it. I think it works out.
Yes, I think it's, again, very similar to most seasons. I think obviously early days still, but overall, story, very good. The narrative, very good. The loot pool, the gameplay loop seems improved. Again, it's not perfect. It might not be to everyone's taste. It is, still more grinding. It is still involving a lot of the core activities, your Gambit and Crucible and Strikes. But I think as seasons go, I think it's again, it's early days, but I like it slightly more than Season of Chosen, which I already liked quite a lot. And especially compared to like Season of the Hunt, like it really shows the difference between like seasons that launch alongside expansions are almost just like kind of just there. Like Season of the Hunt really didn't have that much compared to obviously Beyond Light, but then once Beyond Light is gone, like Season of the Chosen, like quite a good bit of content and story, and then Season of the Splicer even more. So hopefully this trend continues and we get just like the seasons are pretty good. Again, they're not massive expansions. They might not be enough to bring some players back, but I think for what they are, and especially perspective, comparing it to how expansions used to be, the seasons we're getting now, I would say, are better than small expansions we used to get back in the day. Obviously, the difference is the core game is old, so the kind of the baseline might not be as fresh for a lot of people. But the new content we're getting and the new perks, the new exotics, the aspects, the all of the just the seasonal stuff, the story, the cutscenes, the lore, the opening cutscenes, the characters, we're getting a lot more per season than we used to in small expansions. So yeah, I think it's pretty good as far as seasons are concerned.